As you know, we have the subject matter for discussion, the role of the legal system in sustainable social and economic development. And it looks like that this topic that has been raised many times at different round tables. But if you will have noticed that the areas that we suggested for discussion, we try to make a different approach. So when we discuss this topic from different angle, and to make it to make it more specific, and that's why we're going to talk about the areas which is something open for discussion, but does not give us the exact idea how this discussion will evolve. And I'd like to introduce our panelists, our speakers, our moderators. So first, I'd like to introduce Radygin Alexander, as the Dean of the Economic Department of the Russian Academy of RANEPA. And so then Mr. Tikhomirov, Yuri Alexandrovich. So he has a new position now, just a Deputy Center of Public and Legal Research of the Institute of Legislation and Comparative Revold Entov, so the Chief Fellow of the Macroeconomics and Finance Institute of the Economic Policy, named after Gaidar, and Dmitry Dedov, so the Judge of the European Court on Human Rights from the Russian Federation, and our experts. So they are in the first line, first row. Lapteva, so Deputy Head of the Department of History of the Legal Department of the Russian Academy of RANEPA, and Mr. Ivliev, Head of the Federal Service on Intellectual Property, and Elvira Talapina, so Head Fellow of the sector of the Russian Academy of Sciences, and Daniel Witt, so President of the National Center on Taxes and Investments. So he is busy with the lady, so now he's not listening, but he is now. Just he's here. And I think that so we'll follow in the following way. So we'll ask our speakers to make their presentations. Then we, with Alexander Dmitrovich, so when they're done, we'll make an attempt to discuss, to debate the main points. And I'd rather, Alexander Dmitrovich, you start it. So the first floor goes to you. Over to you, please. So Alexander Dmitrovich Radygin, please, over to you. It's quite challenging just to use the system. So good morning. So then, has anyone introduced my colleague, Moderator Stanislav Mogilevsky, the Dean of the Legal Department, named after Spiransky. So that's the Director of the Institute of Law and National Security of RANEPA. Okay, it is true that the subject matter that has been selected for discussion, for our panel discussion, is very important and pertinent. Stanislav mentioned that, and it's as old as it is pertinent. So let's not go back in history for many years. So then, how does the interaction between legislation and economics in the ancient world, in the modern world? So then, even Adam Smith, in his third book, so The Wealth of the Peoples. So he spoke at length about the influence of the law on the behavior of merchants and manufacturers. So Commons work in the 20th century, so classical work, which has become one of the founding areas for the future research Cummings work, and so then the orthodoxy Marxism, so the interaction between the basis and the superstructure, and the form and the substance. So these issues have been discussed at length, but now we have several traditional approaches. We published Calabresi's book at the Gaidar Institute, where this point is discussed. So then the economic analysis and legal approach is identified there. So there are many adherents, and so then these traditions, they are they obviously place the economic theory at the head of these important areas. So it has to do with the orthodoxy Marxism and the Chicago school and the Vienna school and other schools. This is the utilitarian approach, and so something much closer to me, the approach that tells the law and economics, and this is much closer. So they will talk about the interaction and about the interactive enrichment of law and economy, and mutual enrichment. And after an analysis, so we can also conclude that there are many other approaches to the research of the topics that we're going to discuss. And so then Ericsson's book that was published by Gaidar's Institute, so the order without law, so that the law is less important in the world than it's accepted generally. So then there are approaches to the functions of the state, but for us what's important, remembering the background of our discussion and the main subject matter of our forum. So we need to talk about the applied solutions. So how economy and the law can help each other, can reach each other, fertilize each other, and how we can adjust our economic policy. So vis-a-vis important economic applied issues of our economy. And so here we have the main background, and so for the discussion of each expert, so he or she can come out with their own theory and to discuss the issues, because lots of things that are still not properly covered. So next floor goes to one of our speakers, Mr. Tikhomirov, Yuri Alexandrovich, please, over to you. So 10-15 minutes will be fine. Who's going to help? Yuri Alexandrovich. So the lawyers have bad technical education. Okay, let's get on with it. So the law and economy is a pair. So it takes two to tango, right? And it looks like that the economy is a leading role, and the lawyers, they kind of get reconciled to it, but it's not the case. But I'd like to mention that in the last many centuries, we can see that it's actually there is a castling here. So because the economy comes to the fore, and so the economy becomes more important than the law, or the law says that unless there is law, so there is no possibility for any economic reform. without the proper legal background. So so they always prove their points. And so this, I'd say that some 40, 50 years ago, and I remember that time. So the attitude to law was nihilistic. So then there was the principles of logic, but not legality. So now we talk about so first is legality plus feasibility, necessity, and so but I say that so that you lawyers you stand in the way. And you stand in the way of the new economic development, and we cannot make economic decisions. But for me, legality is on the top, and so this interaction. So is the law catching up, or is the economy catching up? And so there's a contradiction between these two partners. And so let me remind you that at the beginning of perestroika, 1990, 1991, and because everyone just was crazy with the market economy, and then in many projects, so then lots of the theory was written at night. So then the law on commodity exchange. So no one knew what a commodity exchange was. So they created more than 900 exchanges, and they thought it would be the locomotive that would pull the Russian economy. It turned out to be wrong because no prerequisites, no nothing. So it didn't work. That is why. So the law is like a bird. Sometimes flies in front, sometimes behind the economic reform. So there are. So the first point that I wanted to make, so how the economists understand the law and the legal system, because sometimes we talk, always say this. That's how because you lawyers, you're in the way. There are too many of you. You are superfluous, and so you have too many bylaws. And I remember one of the meetings at which I was. So let's leave the civil code. That's good because there is Article 546 about public agreements. So let's leave it at that. Let's amend it, tinker with it, and we'll be fine. So, but then the criminal law is in the way. But how can we just do it without major changes in the legal system? No, not possible. And let's change the standards. Can we just tinker with the old criminal code, with the civil code, or it's not sufficient? So now I just understand that deeper changes need to be made. What are the legal instruments in the economics here? So they are first good laws and good courts, because the court starts to act not at the beginning but at the finish, at the end of when the ruling is about to be made. And but who is involved during the first stage of the court proceedings? So the courts are not involved during the first stages of any court proceedings, and then the presumption should be that the business should be a free entity, but actually, so it's not the case, because since the Institute of Legislation, so we get official expert opinion of different projects, bylaws, and federal laws. We have to do to make those opinions, and they at the same time you need to. So then the law on lobbyism that is stuck at the Duma and is not progressing because our lobbyism works fine, but it has a different shape and form. But the economic science is very actively actually impacts so the people's minds and people's legal understanding and of the reality. But we need just to overcome this pinpoint approach in legislation, because we need to change a law, for example, so it either binds the business, slows it down, retards it, and so needs to be changed completely. For example, private-public partnership sometimes works, sometimes doesn't work. But the first assumption is that we need a systemic application of the legislation in the sphere of economy. What do I mean? So we have a different situation with the real economy, difficult situation. Our economists, and I hope that you will not be angry with me, you won't be mad with me if I say that, but I will dare to say that. So then there's a virtual economy and a real economy. So two notions appear. So there could be only one economy if it's there or it's not there. And then there are no people. But we lost our industry. Agriculture is still surviving, but construction is going by fits and starts. So the power sector is developing is very slowly as well. So it's disparate. That's why so then the law as a resource of the economy. So when I wanted to discuss it, so why should we discuss it? So because industry is what? Industry is money, is investment, modernization, upgrade, retooling. That's what economy is. But and then after we have studied it with the scientists, with businesses, ministries, so there is no comprehensive approach of the legislation that exists. And so you know what the comprehensive legislation, you know what that is. For example, so there is a law on industrial policy, so and that delineates the main framework, and there is civil code that gives freedom for businesses. So that there is labor code, so they have forgotten about it, and so we need to remember about that as well. And then pay attention, even if you give a lot of money and invest in industry, so then there are no professionals. So what happens to the graduates of higher education institutions? And so where are the cadres? So where is this professionals? Because 70% so don't work along the lines of the profession that they acquired at the college, and so 70%. And so then the efficiency is very low. So they get one education and they work someplace else. And that has nothing to do with the education they got. And this is, so then the ecological education, legislation, ecological legislation. So try to plan the production. So if you do not take in, if you not factor in so the all the conventions on ecology and so different conventions, so it has to do with the ecology, so then the climate convention, etc. So how can you do anything without paying proper attention to that? So then the ecological standards need to be factored in. So the concept of sustainable development is interrelated, and this allows us to understand the resource that we have. In our legislation, so almost all spheres are covered by our legislation, so pretty well delineated, and we don't have just to look for big white spots in our legislation, because all the white spots are taken care of. So this systemic, comprehensive nature is very important in our legislation. Then the quality of legislation and the sustainable nature of the economic development of our country. And so when the political sphere, then the legislation keeps changing. That's a bail, and the bylaws keep changing all the time. And so that's a tragedy. And we, in our institute, the colleagues, I hope that we will support it. 23, we've been trying for 23 years, so I've been trying to get so the regulatory framework about the regulatory standard business, the way the business should proceed. So the parliament is discussing it, the Duma is discussing it, but there's no progress, no hierarchy. So all the stages, so the act, so from the appearance of an idea until it's implemented. So no legislation there. So very challenging task, and we need to do something about that. But the quality of laws, because we are too quick and we're disparate. So then the amendments are done on the basis of the situation. So there, then the implications are not taken care of, so we don't know what kind of implications there might be. So we don't do forecasting. So we have the law on strategic planning. There is a concept of the strategic development of the country. We don't have this, but these laws are catching up. So the actual economic situation. There are many concepts, many strategies, constituent units, federation. So where is the room for the basic civil law, criminal law, law and education, economic sphere, etc. And or we just will step aside and say, so then amendments are coming along, and we don't calculate the implications, and as we were saying earlier, so that they have certainly templates, so they get instructions from the minister, for example, just who came from another regular meeting, so what needs to be quickly prepared. And you get this template, and you have to turn it into a law, and you have only a few minutes to do that. And then this is, you can forecast it. So and remembering the strategic programs and strategies, very important element. And everything it's all catching up. So amendments, changes, calibrations. So then the administrative code is marking time. So then the initiative. It's an interminable process of initiatives. But the reform is a qualitative leap to a new substance. So if we don't have the law on federal executive bodies, so now just so that the quality of government management law is being in the works right now, and so that's why there's no holistic system, and it's disparate. It's a hodgepodge, and it's a mixture of different things that you cannot make head or tail of, and then we lose sight of the key subject matter. How the legal foundation actually impacts the quality of economic decisions, because the lawyers don't understand what the correlation of laws is, and how the laws are correlated. They don't understand. They don't have this knack of understanding this. So then the president, so the political elite, but this correlation should give you an idea. So what needs to be regulated by the legislative bodies? So what areas? So not to be correlated and calibrated by hand, and which need special involvement and management, and which they do not. And so this is the law on legality and feasibility is very important, because the tug of war is still there. And so then the economists and the legals,
Подобного. Разрешения проблемы нет. Каждый акт имеет регуляторы, различные нормы, нормы цели, нормы принципы, нормы компетенционные, нормы ограничивающие, нормы стимулы, нормы поощрения, нормы санкций, техники и так далее. Выбирайте клавиатуру, тогда ваш роман будет звучать очень вдохновенно. Но сам факт решения – это иллюзия, с которой надо расставаться. Следующая проблема, кратко, это проблема, реализации. Да, реализация, она очень плохо решается в стране. У нас сейчас за последние 20 лет принято около 6 тысяч федеральных законов, 1000 законов принято субъектов федерации. Но эффект реализации у нас невысокий, потому что есть иллюзия того, что сам факт принятия будет реализован. Здесь комплексный подход. Нужно освоить
to learn how to use it. We need to get better understanding of those laws. So we need to have the wherewithal. So then to change the way of the operation of the legislative and executive authorities, local, and so then the theory of law creation has made a great progress, but the theory of application of the law is lagging behind. So you can see that the legislation is inspired. So because we have the punitive system, so more sanctions, more limitations, so more pinpoint regulation, no encouragement, no stimuli. no nothing, and so only punishment. So what is done in OECD, so we just hear, so then so everything, flood, earthquake, they killed someone, murder, etc. So but we don't know just how the law, as per special, for example, legal act impacted positively or negatively the final economic situation, and so then the loan culture, for example. So then so will immediately, so then the number of museums so opened, so will not increase people's education, but we have instructions of the president and the presidential decrees, etc., and constituent units decrees, and so but they don't fit in, so they don't dovetail, and so they're different. So there are governor issues laws, president issues laws, and other authorities. So they make laws as well. But there are indicators of efficiency of the operation of the legal system that needs to be appreciated. So I'm sure that it will make this evaluation of the efficiency of the legal system. So 15 indicators of the positive impact of the law. So the quality of regulation, quality of operation, and about 15 indicators that show that the law only deteriorates things. And so just to make up so this table, so having positive and negative things that are the implication of the application of the law. Thank you, Yuri Alexandrovich. So let me introduce our next speaker, Mr. Entov, in our program. So you're the chief fellow of the Institute of Economic Policy named after Gaidar and the Academy of Russian Academy of Sciences. And for me, so then this image, so then Yuri Alesha, Dr. Gaspar, who knows everything. So then because there is no question that Yuri Mikhailovich could not answer, and I will not read the verse so of his famous novel written by Mr. Alesha, a Russian writer. So let's discuss the interaction between the economy and law and the legal system. So I'll try just to fit in and don't exceed my time. I don't want to do that, and I will just raise only one issue. But before I do that, so in connection with the role of the legal system, so I'd like to just to recollect my lecture in Michigan. And as it was during perestroika, I tried just to discuss the level of negligence to the law and in the Soviet economy, and then the legal and the absence of the legal system, so that we are the only country that's for 100,000 of people, citizens. So we have so few lawyers, and so then I was saying that and then everyone starting to smile. So it's wonderful. Just you don't have any lawyers. So American audience started to smile, and because we have too many, and so they overwhelm us. So America is crawling with lawyers, and we don't need that.
Absence of the rule of law probably meant that the lawyer was not a very popular profession under the Soviet Union. So I would like to discuss one matter about the legal and judicial aspects. So title, protection of property, of ownership, that I believe to be the key issue. And so unlike so I would like to go back to the ancient times. So against the moderators' opinion, so a wide range of research of economists and historians, most of this civilization started with the merge of the merge of power and ownership. All the ancient civilization of Egypt and pharaohs and the Chinese empire and Indian empire. So the ownership was not independent or separate. At that time, it was a component of power, of authority, but did not mean much separately. Those who had the power had the title, the ownership. So this pair went through many centuries and in different forms like serfdom and vassal systems in France, in Russia, serfdom. So, and it existed until quite recent times. I believe there are no people as old as I am in this room, but at least, well, quite mature people are around, and probably you might remember how the wonderful Soviet civil scientist Anatoly Venediktov in 1948 published a book on state and socialist ownership. When you read it, you felt that actually it's again the combination of power and ownership. He was trying to explain that it was different from the pharaohs, but the book was received quite well. And we see with this case that in some situations the power and ownership went hand in hand at all times. So studying all those implications was a separate research, and many historians and economists went into that study. One of the Russian historians, unfortunately, passed away several months ago, Leonid Vasiliev, who wrote many books about it, probably the only historian in the Soviet Union who alone wrote the 6-volume world history, one of my favorite. So I wanted to discuss this matter just to say that we witnessed many different hierarchies of ownership, but what you called the public and private ownership. The public was belonging to Pharaoh, to the Tsar, to the king, is very different from the one I'm going to discuss. So totally different state ownership and private, public and private ownership. So now the separation of power and ownership is special for the Western civilization and emerged somewhere in 16th century with the attempt to restrict the power of the state and the imposition of taxes, introduction of taxes. So Churchill, in the history of English-speaking nations, says that the question arose in 17th century, what's higher, the king or the law? And the people in England stopped paying taxes, and actually it triggered the revolution. Remember the marine tax cancellation introduced by Karl I, and the English Parliament and the states fought against exorbitant taxes, and it resulted in the slogan of English colonists who moved to America: no taxation without representation. Another manifestation of separation of ownership, property, and power, so was the attempt of private ownership to land. We can go back to the archaic forms of land ownership, of historically late but very important works of Peter Talapin, who in 1906 published a special law on the land title and use and cancellation of restrictions of the rights of the rural population. So the new relations emerged, and then later would be included in the Napoleon Code in France, containing the modern approach to the ownership. American Constitution with the Fifth Amendment, approximately at the same time, where it says that the authorities cannot take away the private property without fair remuneration. And again, separation of ownership from power and turning the private property into a special category is a leapfrog in the economic process, is the new stage. And let me appeal to the economic components. Over centuries, we were witnesses so-called Malthusian growth, when the per capita income was not increasing. And then in the 16th century, some kind of statistics shows that over 200 years, GDP, that's where GDP appeared, and the great English expert Madison started to consider it, and so the GDP was growing by 0.3 a year on average over the 200 years, 0.3. But the population grew at higher rates. So the per capita income in this way was shrinking. And in the early 19th century, in spite of the demographic growth, the GDP per capita grew at record rates in the 19th century. Usually it has to do with the Industrial Revolution. A wonderful economist, Douglas North, proved that the Industrial Revolution would be impossible without the basis of a private title. It could have never happened without the proper rule of law on modern private ownership, private property. And another example that has to do with us much more, the market system was introduced in the late 18th century, and especially dynamic financial markets were in the late 19th century that today play exclusive role, a prominent role in economic development. And the financial markets level would always coincide with the protection of private property. We see that the largest financial markets, the two largest in the US and Tokyo financial market, that even London market, Singapore exchange, Hong Kong market can be explained by the very good protection of private property. And we see that in the international indices, Japan and Singapore are within the top 10 countries protecting the private property rights, the ownership rights. And it is so important. If we want to ask an economist, what's the situation in your country? So just look at the position of the financial markets, at least in Russia or in Eastern Europe. Why? Why? Well, there's nothing to say. It is a real problem that requires immediate solution, emergency measures. The private property indices are very complicated. Just to remind you that there are proper international associations. Russia in 2016 was on the 91st out of 128 countries. So again, I can refer to other calculation, Helbridge Foundation calculation and Wall Street Journal estimation. They have different classification. And for Europe, it looks like, you know, the UK, Germany, Holland, Switzerland, all have 90 points out of 100 possible. So in this long list, we're the bottom third. So our rating is 25 points. And to my surprise, I don't know how true it is, how fair, but that's Wall Street, Moldova with the 40 and Albania with the index of 30. And after Russia, we only have Bosnia and Herzegovina. So so many indices, each of them has deficiencies because the property rights are a qualitative indicator, and it is very difficult to describe it with quantitative indicators. But anyway, no matter what methodology you use, Russia is somewhere in the very bottom. So with this poor, despicable condition of the financial markets in Russia, we observe a very acute problem. And I would like to agree to Professor Tikhomirov, who said that economists believe that it's important to pass the law, and then it will immediately work out. I am afraid it's not true. Economists respect statistics, and according to the data of our General Attorney's Office in 2015, at the pre-trial stage, Russian courts made 5 million errors. So it's ironic. The impression is we are proud that our State Duma passes many, many laws, but the enforcement is another matter by the judicial system, by the enforcers who open a case and then allow 5 million violations. I can only join as an economist, and me and my colleagues. So the application of the law is as important, the enforcement is as important as the law in point. And we have many vulnerabilities. And speaking about bad enforcement of the property law, we know about so many raiders operation where the most successful companies would be just seized and taken over through the law. So a case will be opened, then will not even reach the court. But from the very start, the enforcement agencies withdraw the documents. So this kind of a Russian word that means kind of seizure of the documents, but for the first time it was described in the classic literature, and now very nice politically correct young people in black suits come and just take away the hard disks, and the company gets paralyzed, and then in a while you discover that there was nothing wrong about the company. The company was not to blame. It was operating properly. But out of 2,000 cases, well, according to the Supreme Court, out of 200,000, only 2,000 were proven guilty. Are the 90% turned out to be people with destructed property and businesses? So somehow immediately when you ruin a company, so a similar company somehow would emerge next door and start operating after kind of killing the previous company, which had been working properly and did not violate any laws. So it's kind of the unfriendly capture of the business, and then you can, considering you can discuss the course of development of our business in Russia. So let me give you a brief comment. Thank you very much. That's true that many ratings exist about the ownership rights and the property, and we know there are many studies, academic studies with a correlation between the property protection from Scandinavian to French model and financial markets and investments. That's true. Yes, yes. Range regressions between the exactly the correlation for 60, for 80 countries. The better the property is protected, the better the financial markets are. So, has someone in the world tried to consider how the stringent legislation in some countries influence the development and activity of financial market? It is a very important matter. What is rigidity? In Malaysia, in the criminal code, there is an article, a very strict article about the ban of withdrawing assets overseas. In Singapore, there's another article in the criminal law forbidding to inefficient use of the shareholders' funds. So, when it is regulated by the criminal code directly, and it would be nice to have a look at the correlation, because it's not just the economic laws, but I believe we need another 200 years. Because speaking about Germany, somewhere in the 17th century, when there were some 90 counties in Germany, so they would catch the farmers who would cut illegal woods, and they would punish them physically, just tie them to the woods and chop off their hands, whatever. Very cruel punishment that was, but it did work. Its work. It worked. So, a couple of words. It's a very interesting question. So, there's something I have to say. I was trying to prove that, in fact, we have excessive enforcement agencies that would arrest people, out of whom 99% would be later proven innocent. But direct abuse until now somehow are not prosecuted. Yeah, I don't know why. I would like to understand. What's the catch? Where's the catch? I will remind you that we used to have a large number of banks, Logovaz Bank, SBS Agro, Most Bank, and others who were announced bankrupts, and their owners, grabbed billions of dollars and went overseas. For instance, then purchased British companies, purchasing Bentley, whatever. You just look at them. Yeah. This is a quite ancient story, that goes back some 20 years. No, I will not be envying Bentley. If I have a Bentley, then I would have a driver, and I would be driving in the rear seat. But it's not, about driving Bentley or whatever. But we are talking about the funds that would be necessary to purchase the Bentley assets. Then. What about Imperial Bank, run bankrupt? Where's the head of that bank? In Luxembourg, having a good time. And then there was another good bank, International Industrial Bank. Where is the ex-president in London? Where is the bank ran bankrupt? So recent events, a president of a private bank our largest municipal bank, Bank of Moscow, is again in London. The bank is in horrible condition. And so the bank is being restructured, but the bank president, ex-president, buys hectares of land in London at exorbitant prices. And why? Why so? Why none of them did not have any trouble just withdrawing assets from Russia and leaving Russia for a good life someplace in London? So probably political factors. Yes, we cannot argue. Boris Berezovsky used to be the deputy secretary of the Security Council and the Duma deputy, and the ownership of Meshprombank used to be a senator, Mr. Pugachev, Sergei Rodionov, who went to Luxembourg from Imperial, who used to own Imperial Bank, who used to be the deputy chairman of the Central Bank of Russia. So politics is there, but speaking about the property, the ownership, it turns out that these owners became billionaires after the fraudulent operations and now enjoy their life someplace in, some warmer place. And this is, double standard. There are no. You are right in saying that's politics, and logically we have now switched to the law application and enforcement. And the judge of the European Courts on Human Rights, correct me if I'm wrong about your title, so we'd like to pass the floor to you for this aspect, for this range. Just give me a second to complement that. Before Dmitry Dedov became a judge of the European Court on Human Rights from Russia, he used to be a court of high arbitration court. And before that, he used to be a professor of the entrepreneurship law. So again, it goes back. This is a circle, from entrepreneurs to the enforcement practices and human rights protection. So it is all a bundle. I thank you very much. Probably I will not meet your expectations because there were some questions between speakers, and I got, for instance, the rest, but it's cream of the questions. And these questions are the economic conditions that incentivize the illegal or restrict, so that facilitate or prevent illicit behavior. So it is a very wide area that we could discuss, and I believe I can criticize a little the pillars of the economic science. The Americans do not pay great attention to an individual. I will not delve deep into some individual rights because you were brilliant talking about that. I would probably start with the theory that I was pondering for many years, but as to trigger this discussion, I'm trying to be more specific. Expectations of the majority of the people, of the population, and their strategic behavior would depend on social and ethical standards, so-called atmospheric effect. At the same time, the social and ethical standards would depend on the general cultural level. And that gives us an average person, an average citizen. Adam Smith was having a very plain view on the people. So the workers should get so much as to just reproduce, to have some rest, to enjoy, and so to have a decent salary, to live decently. And entrepreneur is like a baker. He produces something. He produces his buns and cakes, and the invisible hand of the market would do its job. So, but it did not turn out.
But it did not work out that way, and so because the role of economic agents, the agents that act on the basis of rational selection, and it turned out that it's not rational anyway as well. So then they were representatives of not the main road, so that there were some side roads, some off mainstream. So Ayn Rand. So then, so she's a hot adherent of the true capitalism. So she was saying that this is the spirit of capitalism, the person with his own hand, his own labor, so by the sweat of his brow, so works and creates so free capital. And so we can recollect another person, French. Bertrand de Juvenel, Jean Goudier, and others, Jean Boudier, his very interesting approach. He spoke about this consumerism, consumer economy, about the possibility, unlike I mentioned Max Weber. I spoke about that. So the adherent of proponent of Protestantism. And so the social standards, so at that time were instilled with the help of religion, with the church, because it was a center where this knowledge was propagated, from which it was propagated, was instilled into the minds of the masses. But now we don't get any messages. At that time, so there were such messages, and so then this spirit of Protestantism so went, and it was replaced by another spirit, the spirit of consumerism, consumption economy. So that was replaced at that time. So when you can buy on credit, and the quality of life started to improve from the viewpoint of social standards. At that time, it was at the initial stage. So when a person was young who could travel, but it acquired such exorbitant, exceedingly distorted forms when the loans were provided to people irrespective of their income, and so still the loan was offered. And when a person tried just to live his best and enjoy all the everything that the society could offer without making money, so not making an income to buy it, and that certainly led and has led to horrible repercussions and crises. And so some more examples of this impact. So of the general trends. So for example, our country is a good example of that. In the 50s, so people worked very hard, and physical labor. Many people, peasants, so they wanted their children so to grow in a different atmosphere. So then they want them to be intellectuals. They wanted them to acquire more knowledge. This acquisition of knowledge. And that's why so many people went to universities, to colleges, and that was great for Russia at that time. In the 60s, so then this feeling of freedom, spirit of freedom, so the wave of the people of the 60s, and that was against the background of the theory of physics. So because just lyrics versus physics, and so then the freedom of creative endeavor. So and that was very attractive. So when lyrics versus physics, physicists, and so then two famous scientists are discussing certain matters. So with the lady on the same train in the same compartment, and she's explaining the theory of relativity to them, and she explained it in a very arcane, incomprehensive manner, but still it was very interesting to listen to that lady speak about the theory of relativity. Then in the 70s, this trade, so the representative of retail, or the representative of a successful person who is involved in a certain type of business. So then the access to some products that were in short supply. Then the 80s, cooperation. There's first cooperatives, so economic activity, freedom. So first cooperatives, which is the that heralded the advent of businesses. So then, in the 90s, jurisprudence was very pure. So all colleges, a huge number of applicants to legal departments of colleges, and everyone just wanted to be a lawyer. Jurisprudence was ruled the day, and because they knew that it was much easier to make money there. And so now, what the trend is now? So because now we're here on the premises of this academy, so the trend is different, because now the state service is the most attractive part. So state service for the public good. It's not just the desire to help the country, but it's the access to power and to financial resources. It's not because they want to help the country. This is very convenient now. And and you see how it has been changing all over these years. And so the main economic term, the main economic condition, which is the most important central part of any issue, it's the economic conditions. I call them economic growth. I refer to it as such. So by itself, so this how to put it better. This concept by itself of economic growth, whereby each country needs economic growth, each company needs economic growth. So although just we don't know why. So there was a publication recently, a paper published to the fact that the GDP in Russia per capita went down twice, and now it's only $9,000 per person. And I said, oh my God. So recently so the exchange rate just went down same time, so same rate. So what are we calculating? So it used to be 35, now it's 65. And so that's why the material volume, in the absolute numbers, GDP has even grown, not fell down. So why do we need to calculate it? Because it's $9,000, but it's the exchange rate went up. And so then, by this next year, it will definitely grow. The economists are saying, why do we need it? So we need just to look at the other criteria. So like access to education, access to medical services, better ecology, doing business easy. That's what we need to look after. This is what very important, rather than GDP. Then what Spravedlivaya Russia is offering. So that's a new theory of how to grow the population. So then the law on population, the law on the peoples of Russia, so what's the main? What are the main challenges related to the ideology of the economic growth? So first is this consumerism, consumption economy, consume non-stop. That allows companies to survive and to increase their sales. Maybe we need to draw a line at it. Maybe we should stop and concentrate on something else. And probably the economists know very well, so those priorities of development, so that need to be related not so much to the growth of quantitative growth, but quality growth, and so you can see it at the level of the companies, and that it has led to false doctoring documents, made up figures, so then Enron, etc., because they had to do it, doctored figures and everything. So the whole industry, the whole economy, American economy, it's one way or the other will come to that, and false figures. And that touches upon the market of the capital markets as well. So so then speculation, because speculation is based on growth. So because the whole idea is first go up and then go down, up and down, up and down. So there's the whole essence of the capital markets. And this expectation of growth, so that certainly leads and brings about this strategic expectations of the people, and then the market of derivatives as well. So which is the top of this achievement that led to the general debacle. And so that's why we spoke about that a little bit. So the G20 level, and then we spoke at the CSC, Securities and Exchange Commission. We spoke about that at that level. That certain decisions need to be made, certain changes, but nothing should be touched anyway. And then a couple of years ago, in the Congress, the word is inclusive prosperity by law was being discussed. So to level off the inequality, and so which especially in the Western society is felt, and so in ours inequality is there. It's egregious inequality, because economic inequality is a comprehensive criterion. As Yuri not necessarily difference in salaries. It's the attitude to people. It's much deeper than that, and so that led to the distrust to the economic institutes. And so then look at our country. So even now all these issues are on the surface, and they have been verbalized, and they all led to so then radar attacks, their corruption, venality, all flourishing. And so because people understand, so where there's power, it is going to be good, because it destroys, it erodes the idea of power, because people go and try to partake from the power not because they want to help the country but want to enrich themselves. So then certain ethical. Then the power should have ethical principles and follow the legal system ideas. For example, so what's the point of competition? Do we understand? We understand competition just to be ahead of your competitor, or that the competitors influence each other, but not just to think of a better product, to think of a better innovation that would improve the quality of life of the people and to give them more freedom. And so that's a completely distorted idea. And so these ideas so they are eroding so the main principles of competition. When Steve Jobs died, head of Apple, I remember this. I was not the only comment actually on the web. So one of the bloggers said, "So why?" So one of the bloggers, so you worked your tail off all your life, and so you made a lot of money, and then the disease strikes him down. So what's the point? He said. So he failed to understand that Steve Jobs did not live for the riches, but he lived for having his life being interesting. He lived for interest. He lived for passion. And this is different. And this is different. Some people don't understand because wealth is one of the conditions so that actually erodes so the people's minds and leads to wrong stimuli and priorities. That is why. So we're waiting for messages. So the church used to send those signals, right? So take me a couple of minutes. I'm finished, because we're waiting for those messages, because people who have those internal endogenous stimuli, it's only 5-10% of people like that. So then, but 100% of the graduates so then go to. I mean, it's impossible to say that. So those who leave school go to colleges. Not all of them. It's impossible. Those statistics that in the United States now they were proud 70 or 60%. So they reach the age of 80. Then they don't understand. So the quality of education is plummeting, both in America and in Russia. So no signals, so moral, ethical principles. And so we're waiting for those signals from our top managers, so from our authorities, from our. I remember also then story with Deripaska, so when the president asked him to return the pen to him. So that was the story about the responsibility of the businessman who buys a plant and then bankrupts it. So this. So it certainly is much easier just to fire 1,500 people rather than just to work. So he was not allowed to do that, thank God. But his attitude to people, why do we need commuters, commuter trains? So let's just cancel them all. And then, so Putin had to speak forcefully to them to bring it all back. And with the amendments about the regulation on corporations and legal entities were added to the civil code. And so at that time, at the Ministry of Economic Development, they did not want to add this amendment on affiliated persons. Yeah, because it was already so it was dying out even in the old law, in the old code, and so did not want just to add this affiliated persons article. So they are just it's flagrant violation of the main principles, because affiliated people are persons is this protection against the conflict of interest. So this is why, and then they had to speak from the top. Yeah. So this that decided just to take the academicians to take them off their work, because when Mr. Putin had to find nice words, so not to offend them. So because if you have your hands full at the Academy of Sciences, maybe you should abandon working for the government. And so people who influence. So this is the conflict of interest. So how can they possibly both be in the financing sector of the the Ministry of Sciences at the same time to work for the Ministry of Sciences? So then the problem of number of academicians, we have twice as many academicians in Russia than we had in the Soviet Union. More academicians. So then member correspondents make 50,000, and academicians make 100,000. So that's a good addition to their salary, and that is why they're all academicians now, and it's a sinecure. So they will be getting this money until their dying day, 100,000 rubles a month, and this is an ethical. It has an ethical component to it, and so the writing is on the wall. But every time, so they have to be reminded that there is an ethical thing that needs to be taken into and need to be factored in. So because at the general level, people don't understand what ethics is, and had to be reminded from the top. So let's ask the experts to participate in this discussion. If you don't mind, I'll try to bridge the presentation about the property and try to connect it. And to draw this line and connect it, whether it's good for our country, the intellectual property. So to bridge these 2 points. And I will ask Mr. Ivliev, so head of Rospatent, so to come out with his idea about this point. What's your take on this? So we said, 5-7 minutes, please. Colleagues. Now understand why the name of our panel is sustainable development, because it's a conservative position. Because other panels, so from the economic bloc, they will be talking about the program, plan, what the government needs to do to increase the rates of growth of the national economy. And so we have to get this plan developed by the government by May. And so the role of legal instruments, and for me the most important is not the law or the implementation and the application of the law, because the fourth part of the civil code is done pretty well, and actually so the property areas are pretty well covered. But what are the mechanisms that will allow to step up the rates of the economic growth, it's much more challenging than just to explain why we need the rates of growth and why we need to speed up the economic growth, but to find what is the wherewithal, what are the makings of this bigger growth. And so, for example, now we start to make enough food to feed the country, and so there are lots of poor people, and so we need. And I wanted to show you this chart, so that all presentations of my colleagues, so from Korea and from Japan, so they start with this. So this is the relationship between application for inventions and the GDP growth. So look, in Korea, it's correlated very closely, so 98 degree of correlation. So this is the Russian slide, and so then the R coefficient of correlation is quite high, 76, but it's not 98 like in South Korea. So, but there is no correlation between GDP and the number of submitted inventions applications and applications. So no, and so the GDP is not growing. And so we know that, so then in the area of intellectual property, the Institute of Intellectual Property, which is determining for the development of all modern innovative economies, so we don't understand these processes because we don't have this economic analysis. And I'm always happy every time just to speak about that on economic conferences, and when I talk to the audiences, and when I wanted from our leading economists their ideas. So how the Institute of Intellectual Property as an object of intellectual property impact our economy, and what can we do about that? And because intellectual property inventions is the process of management knowledge management. So this is what intellectual property is all about. It's managing knowledge, and so I want just to reflect some facts. And so then, for example, investment in applied research. So the budget allocated, earmarked is as is the same. So, but the number of Russian applications has not grown, and in spite of a lot of investments added to it. And so the same trend, so we can see it, so from all the way, starting from the beginning of the 21st century. And then businesses, legal entities, so they're not submitting any applications for patents. So even it's gone down. So there are fewer patent applications than individuals. And so then privatization of all the research when they own the results, and so when they get the patent and they get the dividends, so they're due to the inventor. Instead of that, so all the patents and the money, so due to the inventor, they go to the owner of the enterprise. And so nothing is right here. So this one is even more telling. So this is the statistical research. 2,500 companies that use intellectual property. So 2,500. So they say. So the use of intellectual property. And so then the best they send in this information, and so whether they use intellectual property, what they use, and what they stand to gain to use it, and so the percentage is very low because not all objects of patent law are using this, and so but the green curve shows that the percentage of patents vis-a-vis the existing is growing, is decreasing. So the percentage of the use of patents is decreasing. This is completely opposite to what the economists of the leading patent states is behaving, because they calculate the number of patents, hundreds of thousands, and so we have about 60,000 patents in our country, and in Korea almost 300,000 patents, and so the use of patents is much less, So there is no correlation. There's statistics on international patenting. So because the patent is protected all over the world, it gives you global opportunities. And so we don't see this analysis in our economy. So they say, oh, patents, so they stand in the way of business, and they ignore the fact that the patent is the only instrument that motivates capital investments, because and without protecting patents, so the investments, there is no point in investments, and then there's no need to invest in a patent, and so this why, because patent is directly related to investments. Investments are directly related to the wealth and economic development. And so then the 5 leading economies of the world are using this instrument and only increasing it, and was saying, no, we don't need it, so we need to remove all the patents. So then in China, so they create patents more than the United States of America. Almost 40% of all patents, patent applications are in China. They organized it. So 40% of all patent applications. And the correlation between the patent activity and invention activity and the growth of GDP is very close. Now South Koreans, so then the patent authority evaluates our scientific potential much higher than Korean potential. Yeah, but the system is built differently, and this is why then the implementation of the 4th part of the civil code. And so the patent system started in the 90s. The patent law in Russia appeared in 1990, 1991, and Russia became effective. But it's a very short period of time. So because they have failed to build these relations, so they lost a lot in education, and so then the patents, so the circulation is very limited. And it's part of the economic circulation, but not part of the intellectual property. So look at this slide. The point is that the patent, and so for example, so then when we use this patent all over the world, and using this patent in the global economy, makes it efficient, makes it profitable. So if there's certainly so there's a certain procedure of registering patents in Russia only, in the United States, but there are new systems created, cooperation systems, how to register patents, international system of patent registration, and they can be registered not only in every specific country, not only in the regional aspects. So then one patent of Europe, so for the whole of EU. For example, we don't even know that in Moscow we have Eurasian patent organization, and if you submit your patent, so it costs so much. If you submit, but they get a patent that is good for 8 states of the former CIS countries, same cost. So then certainly, so international patenting is the best. So now the government is invested some money. So they even just anyone just who so they reimburse everything. So then the patent taxes, duties, returned, and everything. So they need to develop this new international patent system developed, and so the government helps. Then patent cooperation. So when you can just submit a patent application in Russia through the International Bureau, and register it using it following the standards of the patent procedure in every country where you plan to use this patent. And so when the Russian applicant 876 in China, more than 50,000 applicants that work within this system. So the global markets are closing down. So so then promoting your product to the international markets is exactly what will give a boost to your economy, will create more jobs, and promote evolve new technology. It's impossible just to move to the international markets if you have a backward system. And so then, for example, so we have thousands. So then state-of-the-art technologies, so they go internationally, only a few thousand, but is the future of the economic development. So then trademarks, it comes right under, so trademarks, so they registered so in 2016, so it's 1,256, a little bit more than in 2015, not enough. Trademarks. Although in Russia, so we register a lot of trademarks. This is the economic activity of our businesses in spite of crisis and sanctions. 2015, 2016, the number of trademarks increased, and so that means that the services and goods so need to be protected and they go abroad. That's good. Yeah. And legislation. So design, very interesting, very important for any industrial production, for any manufacturing process. So they're at the incipient stage. So the fewest, it's only 3,000 applications for design, only a few. But we have not even ratified the design convention, so that provides for simplified international organization. Now it's in the Duma. But the Minister of Education that is responsible for the government policy in the area of intellectual property has not promoted it yet. And so these three components will allow you to go international and increase the economic growth that we are searching for, and they need to be implemented. And so then only the most recent law so helps to develop it. That was. So came into force only summer last year. Then you were right in saying that the protection of property rights and patent rights is the most important thing. So in the area of intellectual property, we feel this vulnerability because the patent can be stolen. The technologies are known. So 3 months any technology will come from the internet.
But the patent is supposed to protect it for 20 to 25 years, and we see very convoluted processes, but it is important to have the patent protected very quickly. So shorter terms for patents and brands is the tool that will allow us to accelerate seriously. So at this chart, we see that even with the lower financing, going down for 3 years in a row, with modern technologies and proper management, we managed to cut the time of consideration for invention to 9 months, on the industrial sample to 6 months, and in 2016, in December, we have 10 months only for trademark, and we'll keep going. So coming back to the previous slide, it's not sufficient just to work on it in this ordinary administrative way when you can use some additional resources. We need complete upgrade of the electronic system of the Ross patent IT system. We have big data now. We have 36 databases that are like separate silos. They are not connected. We have to work on millions of sources for each expert exercise. So we have online connection with 50 countries, and now Colombia, Venezuela, and small countries are joining. We know online what patents. Within a week's time, we know different protocols. We know the patents, and 2 million patents that are now issued is the annual volume. That's something that should be on your fingertips. But how can I do it if I can ensure only the sources from 2,000 sources? So automation, 600,000 is our target that my expert will be able to access. This is 2021, but it will allow us to ensure a totally different quality. And the scientists and inventors will have access and benefit of this system. And that's so we are working on protecting the intellectual property. Thank you. Thank you, Grigory Petrovich. And so, do we have more experts? Again, let me bridge the gap to Grigory and his historical background. Lyudmila, the director of department of the law and history of the law of our academy. Please mind the timing. So I did not have any special issues. So on my agenda, what I felt is about economic feasibility, about the laws and economic efficiency. So the laws are there to comply, and the benefit of the law should be considered before the law is passed. But our agile legislation gives us the situation when sometimes the law is published, but then thousands, dozens, hundreds and thousands of amendments should be made to the law. So again, today is the special holiday. So today is the attorney's day. So Peter the Great created an attorney's office. It was not a procedural and judicial agency. It used to be an eye, the kind of holy see of the Tsar, to watch over the senators and governors complying to the law. So the fiscal institute was set up at the same time, just to make sure the law is observed is in economics, unlike the attorney's office, who had its ups and downs, but still existed until 1917. But fiscal agency did not last long. But the Anna, the Tsarina, was trying to recreate the fiscal agency as a secret agency to monitor, to supervise the economy. So on one hand is setting the targets. On the other hand is kind of transfer of creating awareness to the public. And this feedback from the public should be considered before the law is passed. So now many laws before passing are presented for the public discussions, and public expectation is a component that should be taken into consideration. Once the law doesn't work the way it was expected to, and the consumers, so the law turns into an empty piece of paper. And as I have to skip many things, so I agree with Mr. Dedov about the ethics. If you see lately, over the last few years, in the constitutional court's rulings and human rights courts, they refer to so-called general fair principle. So fair is a cross-disciplinary principle. So people understand it in different ways. But if you just consider law and economics separately, you can understand it in the following way. You read the Constitution, Article number 1 and 2, and no one has yet canceled the priority of the individual rights as a citizen. So what you need to apply is the maximum consideration of individual rights. So pragmatically, if you achieve the goal that you intend to enforce with the law, you need to consider the individual rights of a citizen, and that's where we have issues. Let me give you an example, a tragic case. When we used the law of 1995 about the general self-governance principles, a number of sources for the local budgets was offered, that the range of questions that the local authorities with people could address independently. And at the end of last century, some rural authorities remote from the regions, regional centers, would set up some small hospitals, small schools, and you understand where I'm driving at. And then the law of 2001 was passed. It's either you privatize, but local citizens did not want to privatize. They wanted it to be budgeted locally to provide affordable services, accessible services to the local population. You privatize or you just bring it to the center. And so in Volga region, in the central region, they had to do it. So what have we got? We got a very interesting thing. We got less rural villages, not formally, but people just run away because they lost their infrastructure, hospitals, schools. Yes, indeed. If you don't have a hospital, a little hospital, children have to walk to the bigger town from a village in hard frosts, or there are no hospitals, there are no schools, so the rural population goes to the cities. The agriculture cannot survive in this area, so I have to leave some time to other experts, so I thank you for your attention. So having heard the fiscalate, I cannot fail to pass the floor to the expert who is probably the best person to discuss it, the president of Tax and Investment International Center, Daniel Witt. So let us hear from Daniel Witt, and I would like our experts again to watch our timing because there is plenary starting soon.
In translation, thank you for that kind introduction, and it's a real privilege and an honor to be speaking together with such esteemed Russian academics. It was quite heartening to see how much we agree on, particularly as we think about what are the key legal elements to form a state, whether it be an old state or a new state. Property rights and taxation kept coming up. And it was particularly interesting to hear from the two professors about bridging the gap between policy and administration, or put it more broadly, implementation and administration. And I love linking law and economics. Usually you have judges, lawyers who haven't studied economics, but are being forced to understand things, cost-benefit analysis, transfer pricing, for which they've had no training. And now when we look at a more complicated regulatory environment that includes ecological laws, those often go to courts and go to lawyers who have had no training in that sphere. So that is a challenge, and we're seeing more and more disputes. So maybe we need to look back at the laws and the regulations and see where are the flaws in their drafting that are leading to the disputes. And I have worked, it's been a real pleasure. I've been to Russia probably over 150 times, first coming here in 1991. I run an NGO that started in Russia, and then we worked in Kazakhstan on helping countries develop and reform their tax regimes. We've now worked in 85 countries, but with our start right here in Russia. So it's quite heartening. So I'll just touch on a couple of things. When we talk about tax administration, I look at that as the foundation of the legal relationship between a state and its citizens. Like, how can you have security if you don't have law enforcement? So that is the connection that binds your people, your society, and the state, the tax administration. And then I loved hearing Judge Dedov talk about trust, because confidence and trust is key to make this relationship work. But it must be two ways. The citizens must trust the authorities that they're going to do the right thing with the money, their money that they pay in taxes, that they're going to do the right thing with their tax declarations, that they're not going to leak it to a competitor to do harm with them. And then also, the authorities must have trust in the taxpayers that they will legally and ethically and in good faith comply. Now, with that trust and confidence, you can use various risk management models and focus the scarce resources of the state's tax administration on cheaters and fraudsters, and make paying tax for the honest, good faith business or individual not painful, not scary, not torture. And again, I heard the comment from the professor about we're looking at such a penalty and such a negative-oriented approach. When you listen to the G20 and what's coming out of the OECD about BEPS, you know, where do we talk about making a tax system easier? Where do we make a tax system less painful, more hospitable, so people want to come in, not run and hide? And I think of one place where we've seen that was in Russia with your new tax code in 2000, with the flat tax, the 13% flat tax. Very controversial. Some of the big international organizations were strongly against it, like the IMF. But beyond a doubt, there's been econometric study on top of one another that it worked. It made it simple. It made it easy. It didn't make it scary. And it all, these evasion schemes go away because they were no longer worth it. The incentive to comply was there. And I think those are lessons that we have to look at. And you also, it took into consideration, I mean, one size does not fit all. And that's one of the things as we work around the world, and I see some of the other international organizations, one of their biggest flaws is try to force one system from one country to another without taking into consideration the societal realities and the administrative capacities. And you think about 15 years ago, the challenges of your federal tax system. Today, it's a modern system. I mean, my congratulations to Chairman Mishustin and his colleagues. They've come a long way in 15 years. So I think if we look at systems that are simple, transparent, and easy to administer, you're going to see the compliance rates go up. Those court cases that Professor Entov mentioned, that pain and suffering invoked on your citizens will go away. And that is my aim. And then there still is a shadow economy and illicit trade that the judge mentioned. And we have to maybe pause for a moment and step back. I mean, that is robbing the government of money. It is creating an inequity for the legal taxpayer. It's eroding the social fiber because the legal guy is saying, well, why am I so stupid to be paying when this guy isn't? So we need to look at the cause. Is it complexity? Is it a high level or burden of taxes that drive people to cheat and engage in illegal activity? And these are critical considerations for any new taxes in a state. Now, as Russia, I believe, is turning the corner and coming out of the recession, I think it's time to pause and review your successes to date on the very topics we're talking about this morning, and look at ways in which you can continue to spur growth. And I can't help but think back to President Putin's first term, so 2000 to 2005. You had successful policies. The new tax code put in place, and it worked. It was generating enough money to fund social programs, pensions, and infrastructure. Standard of living had grown. And think about the oil price in that period. It was between $40 and $60 a barrel. It wasn't some super inflated number that was distorting the economic performance. It was a normal price. So I can conclude these were policies that led to growth and human development and improved standard of living in Russia. And I would love to see Russia go back to the future. So let me just close with a summary. I'll be on a panel with Natalia tomorrow, on Saturday, on digital economy and e-commerce. I think Russia has got the table set to be a leader in that sector, but I also would like to see you step up, that people like the intellectual giants here and your leaders in the Duma to be the leaders and setters of standards and regulations, not waiting to follow what comes out of the OECD in Paris. Russia must lead in some of these areas on rulemaking, and we'll talk more about those on Saturday. But just to close, we heard some great quotes from historical economists who I read about in business school. But one of my favorites was from the former CEO of Citibank, Walter Wriston, where he said, "Capital is a coward. It flows to where it is treated most kindly." So I believe that history has proven that low and competitive tax rates, a transparent and easy to comply with bureaucracy or regulatory regime, and strong property rights, that is the recipe for attracting investment and keeping your domestic investment rather than seeing it fly away. This worked in Russia in the 2000s. I have no doubt it can work again. So those are my comments. Let me just conclude with 2 points on why I traveled yesterday from Washington, D.C. to be here. First, I have the utmost respect for Igor Gaidar and his key role in transforming the Soviet economy into a market-oriented Russian economy. And in fact, the very first conference that I was involved in organizing in Moscow in November and December 1991, that very historic period, I was only in Moscow, but yet I was in 3 countries. I arrived in the USSR, and for the 1 week, I was in the USS, the Union of Sovereign States. And when I left on December 8th, it was the CIS. And at that conference, we were honored that Dr. Gaidar was one of our keynote speakers with President Yeltsin, and that laid the groundwork for us to create ITIC. So my utmost respect to the too short of a life of Dr. Gaidar, and my ongoing respect for the institution that is his legacy to continue his vision, ideas, and work. And the other reason I'm here, I'm a private citizen, I'm not involved with the government, but I am optimistic and very hopeful and very confident that the relations between Russia and the United States will improve. We have very similar presidents, or soon we'll have very similar presidents. I mean, I think when President Putin came in, succeeding President Yeltsin at the new millennium, You know, he had an identical campaign theme, although he didn't have to campaign that hard, to make Russia great again. Well, we know what President-elect Trump is saying, make America great again. So I think those visions and personalities may work. So it is my hope that the friendship between our two great countries will be strengthened again, and that will lead to closer economic cooperation. If so, I have no doubt that our people and the world will be better off. Thank you very much.
Спасибо, Даниэль.
Thank you, Daniel. And it's symbolic that we now can pass the floor to the leading expert of the IT, information law sector of the Russian Academy of Sciences, Elvira Lapteva. Thank you. So, considering I'm not left with much time, so I'll be very brief and focus on one aspect that we touched upon generally, on the public law role in economics. And I have 4 ideas here to offer to your attention. First, so sharing the point of view that passing the law is not a solution to the problem, it's just a starting point. And still, in the regulatory area, we have generally private law. So we are good with the civil code and federal legislation, but the public law that regulates the authority, the activity of the authority is quite poor. And then the units that are set up, you know, with the public participation are, you know, a way to go, like state corporations. So the state concept has not yet been polished yet. And the legislation here requires improvement, much improvement and development, and public economic law should be set right. And the regulation in economic may only have a comprehensive manner, public and private law. But how should they influence such a complicated object as economic?
We have our methods, and those are two things that are dramatically opposite. Antagonistic systems, that is why we need a balance in its application. To achieve the balance, we need certain clear-cut criteria. I can just come out with certain considerations about that. So then the civil law and the private law has its limitations in their application vis-a-vis the state entities, because not so with the state you cannot just conclude all securities cannot be issued, so not all the deals can be signed and concluded because of the limitations, natural limitations. What do we need from the state, and what economic concept we adopt? So then the way the civil code was adopted, was passed, so we say that the state is a kind of merchant, is an entity, and a subject of a trading aspect, so a kind of merchant. And so was news that the government of Moscow is preparing some amendments to the federal law about offering real estate sites to individual businessmen, so providing at better prices, and Moscow government saying being just a market entity, they have to decrease the prices, and so actually the businessmen can contest this price. So they want just to deny the business the right to contest this. And so then the market is acting in the market conditions. And that is why the lawyers are not strong here, because all we need to do is to reflect a certain economic concept, how we regard the state and economic. So we give them the freedom of contracts, freedom of agreements, or we put some limits, limitations, and then the public law should act here. then so then very briefly, so we have a trend whereby we adopt when we pass a law. So we leave an article. So then in the terms in so the federal law. So they refer to the federal law, and so that's why the application of the law becomes disparate, very confusing. So in civil code, it's one thing that in other codes it means something else, and so that is why that needs to be certainly addressed. Then the third point is the balance between the public and private law, and so because their weights are different, because the public law is behind, and so there's not enough legislative effort on public law, and so then executive powers. I want us to follow through on this assumption, so which was voiced at the beginning. So then the law and application of the law and is very important. Enforcement, and so not only the enforcement authorities and certainly the courts, but the executive authorities. So they control that because they issue licenses. So they make deals, and this is very important. So, but why the executive authorities? They make this kind of decision or that kind of decision. It's not regulated. It's arbitrary, and so because it's not only the courts, but it's the legislation. So and then the Academy of State Service. So they're developing these new principles. So how to streamline so the way so the state interferes in this area, and so then the requirements to the orders, instructions that executive authority, so that the courts can control only the legality of the issued acts and orders. So this is the formal procedure. So competence is whether it has been observed or not, but they have no right just to change everything. So they have to monitor and make sure that it's in compliance of what the executive branch has made, and then so to give the right to the court to control the so the expediency and the logic of the orders that they issue. So why, for example, so they can question the authority of the legislative branch whether they had the right to sign a PPP agreement, for example, or and so then the role of the courts role should be certainly enhanced on this account, so that they could control and monitor the executive authorities, and then so we need just to create the administrative justice and increase the competence of the courts. About that, the competence of the court system. Participants of our panel discussion, so we're concluding our work and remembering that in 15 minutes so the plenary session begins about 12 o'clock, and I would like to thank all the participants, those who spoke, and then our discussion, not only the experts and the speakers and those who came and visited us, not many, but those were very good audience. So I'd like to thank you very much. So see you later. Goodbye.